My son Jackson will be 10 years old this summer. He's amazingly social, actively sporty, and always curious. He's asked me about the Boys and Girls Club many times in the last few years. I tell him it's where I spent my afternoons and summers growing up in Santa Monica. I was a latchkey kid in the early 80s. Both my parents worked for hourly wages while raising me as their only child. And the club became both my safe place to be after school and a place where I would learn things like leadership, responsibility, respect, athletics, and even environmental awareness. But that's another story. Part of my contribution today as one of the club's less seasoned board members is to fundraise to create, maintain, and grow the unique facility and staff we call the Santa Monica Boys and Girls Club. One of the programs includes what's been called a Community Service Exploration Program. I simply call it South Africa. In the summer of 2012, the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Monica took 9 kids from clubs in Pomona, Kauai, Hawaii, and Santa Monica to South Africa. The kids were selected based on their achievements at school, leadership characteristics, and their interests in helping their community, among other things. Thinking it would be an eye-opening experience for Jackson, I chose to send him on the trip, and I figured I'd tag along merely as a chaperone. But what happened next was simply life-altering. We met at the airport. Some of the kids hadn't traveled on a plane before. None of the kids knew each other, and for some it was their first trip out of their own cities. After a 21-hour flight, we landed in South Africa and headed straight for safari. At night, the trip leaders, Sarah and Michelle, would host roundtable chats with the kids where each would share their thoughts about the day's events, lessons learned, and new perspectives, and what I would later learn to be amazing insights from some amazing young adults. Jasper, tell us, what was your favorite animal you saw on safari?
My favorite animal I seen on safari was the cheetah, because we got out of the van and we walked up to it and we seen actually what it does on a day-to-day basis. My favorite part of being on safari is just a separation from society. It just feels you're alone with the nature and you're one with the cosmic energy.
My favorite animal was the cheetah because of the design, and it was just really beautiful and how it ran. And my favorite part about the safari was probably seeing just the landscape and the sunset and the sunrise, because it was all just 100% perfect and beautiful.
In just 2 days, we were told by our guides that we saw the Big Five: leopards, rhinos, buffalo, hippos, and lions. We even saw a flat tire and a couple of broken down trucks, but we managed to make the best of it. While my guide wandered off to find some rocks to prop up our jack, our driver made tea. We ate little biscuits while looking over our shoulders to make sure we didn't become the biscuits. Another airplane hop and we arrived in Cape Town, where we hit all the museums and we learned about the slave trade and about apartheid.
Hi, I'm Jackson and we're in Cape Town, and right now we're about to go up a lift that takes us, I'm pretty sure, the tallest mountain in Cape Town. And the environment here is really amazing. There's so many birds and trees, and there's so many mountains here. It's just wonderful. I get to come here with my dad and do all this.
We visited the famous Table Mountain, had a great time touring around and seeing both sides of the Cape from the top of the mountain. It was great to be there with my son Jackson. I was very proud to have him there and to be there with him. The bay seemed so beautiful from the top of the mountain. Out in the distance was Robben Island. It looked so serene. We took a boat ride out to Robben Island. The ride itself was pretty fun. Sarah, Joss, and I tried to nervously chat each other up to avoid any chance of seasickness. Joss even drank some ginger root juice, and it seemed to work pretty well, I guess. But Robben Island would turn out to be one of many solemn and somber sights during our trip. Jackson and I learned about how then prisoner Mandela would spend 18 of his 27 years imprisoned. A small cell with one window, a tiny table, a mat, and a bucket was a sobering sight. An astonished Jackson asked, "My God, Dad, how could he live here?" The tour on Robben Island is hosted by former inmates. This one spent 8 years on the island, and his stories were filled with stories of pain, endurance, compassion, and remarkably reconciliation. Jackson is usually not short of words in any setting, found himself breathless and speechless in the face of this merciless place. We left the island and traveled back to Cape Town, headed for the Amy Beale Foundation headquarters. On August 25, 1993, a black mob pelted Amy's car with stones and smashed its windows while shouting racial epithets. Amy was struck in the head with a brick and then dragged from her car and surrounded by a mob who stoned and stabbed her to death while she begged for her life in the street. I wondered while at the museum if this was just all too much for Jackson, but I could see in his face and on the other kids' faces the compassion and empathy and understanding they had for Amy's story. Amy's mother runs the foundation today. We met her staff and she gave us a private tour and a video presentation of the foundation's achievements to date. We learned that Amy's attackers actually work for the foundation today and are at the heart of the Amy Beale movement. Jackson's witnessed firsthand what reconciliation can mean between a country and its people. I was amazed and I felt my capacity for understanding had increased. My humanity had deepened. Later, we traveled to the bottom of the African continent. For Jackson and me, it was the furthest we had ever traveled from home. Even the ostriches were keen to get a look at these Westerners. Speaking of Westerners, our trip to the markets gave the kids a chance to bargain with the locals. Needless to say, Jackson's suitcase was about 10 pounds heavier on the trip home. I told Jackson we were going to do some community service on our trip. What we experienced in Soweto was so much more. We visited the Hector Peterson Museum, as well as the Mandela House, and later we drove to Pimville. When we arrived, Jackson immediately found his mates on the football field. Here they were not foreign or Western, they were not poor or without, they were kids. Kids who need encouragement, supervision, skills, leadership, compassion, and love. It was amazing to see just how children anywhere and everywhere really are our most amazing treasure. We stripped and painted the walls. We created a special place together with the kids of Pimville. With pickaxes, shovels, and rakes, we built a garden in the frozen winter tundra. We taught ourselves and the kids to plant seeds, which they will sow next spring. In Pimville, we learned that the joys and impact of the Boys and Girls Clubs is not a uniquely American experience. It's one that can be shared everywhere.
Jabulisa izitha zothando lwethu, uphazamisa nezifiso zenhliziyo yami. Ejabulisa abantu besixabanisa ngezani. Ejabulisa izitha zothando lwethu, uphazamisa nezifiso zenhliziyo yami. Ejabulisa abantu besixabanisa Alamanga, alamanga labantu, alamanga, alamanga labantu, esixabanisa alamanga, alamanga labantu, alamanga, alamanga labantu, esixabanisa alamanga. Elamanga yamehlo, ungavungubuza nabantu, yalishintsha umkhono, esixabanisa alamanga, yalishintsha umkhono, ungavungubuza nabantu.
For Jackson and the other kids on the trip, I was so proud of them. Ambassadors, brothers, sisters, members. On this trip, realizing their full potential as caring, responsible, and productive citizens. And the kids of Pimville showing us the beauty of their character. Just amazing. One night the kids performed a play for us. It was Mandela and Serafina combined into one piece. It was hard to keep my camera still from the screams of encouragement and clapping. It was just amazing. We left Pimville with a new Boys and Girls Club of South Africa. Casey's dream realized, at least the first chapter. A new clubhouse with a media center, games room, garden, and a fresh coat, primed and sculpted by the hands of its own community. Jackson and I had spent almost 3 weeks together. He was my roommate, travel companion, son, and fellow club member. I was so proud of who he was on our trip. I was so proud of all the kids on our trip. I wish every board member and supporter of the Boys and Girls Club movement could experience the magic of our youth in this cultural exchange in South Africa. It's the best of who we are, and in the Boys and Girls Clubs, we find the best in our future.